There is a moment that happens with an avoidant that most people completely misread. They pull away from you, they go quiet, they seem distant, and everyone around you tells you to move on. But what if that pulling away is actually one of the clearest signs that this person loves you more than they have ever loved anyone? What if everything you have been reading as rejection is actually something completely different? Today, I am going to show you 5 things an avoidant only does when they are deeply, genuinely in love with you. Not just interested, not just comfortable, deeply in love. You know that feeling when you are lying in bed at night and your mind just will not stop. You replay the last conversation. You analyze every word they said. You try to figure out what that look meant, why they texted back differently this time, why they seemed close one day and completely unreachable the next. And no matter how many times you go through it, you still cannot figure out if this person actually loves you or if you are just convenient to them. You check your phone. Nothing. And then you wonder what you did wrong. Because that is the thing about loving an avoidant. It does not just hurt. It confuses you at a level that is almost impossible to explain to someone who has not lived it. Your friends tell you to just move on. They say if someone wanted to be with you, they would be with you. And you hear them. You understand the logic. But something inside you knows this is not that simple. Something inside you has seen a version of this person that others have not seen. A version that was soft and present and real. And you cannot reconcile that version with the one who disappears without warning. So you stay in this place that is exhausting. Not quite in the relationship. Not quite out of it. Just waiting. Hoping. Trying to decode signals that feel like they were designed to be impossible to read. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I push too hard. Maybe if I had just said that thing differently or not said it at all, they would still be here. You take on the weight of something that is not entirely yours to carry, because loving an avoidant has a way of making their emotional unavailability feel like your personal failure. And what makes it even harder is that you have seen their warmth. You have felt it. Those moments when they let their guard down, when they looked at you in a way that made everything feel clear. Those moments were real. You did not imagine them. And that is exactly why walking away feels impossible. Because you are not chasing a fantasy. You are chasing the real version of someone who keeps hiding from themselves just as much as they hide from you. I want you to know something before we go any further. What you are feeling right now is not weakness. It is not neediness. It is what happens when a deeply empathetic person loves someone who learned a long time ago that love comes with risk. I want to take a moment here and explain why understanding avoidant behavior requires a completely different lens than most relationship advice gives you. In 1987, psychologist Mary Main introduced what is now called the adult attachment interview, which built on the original work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. What this research revealed was something that changed the way we understand adult relationships entirely. The way we attach to romantic partners as adults is directly shaped by how our earliest caregivers responded to our emotional needs as children. Not just sometimes. Every single time. When a child reaches out for comfort and that comfort is inconsistently given, or when emotional expression is met with withdrawal or dismissal, the child's developing brain does something remarkable. It adapts. It learns to suppress emotional needs in order to stay connected to the caregiver. Because connection, even imperfect connection, is survival for a child. An avoidant attachment is what forms when someone spent years learning that needing people too openly leads to pain. I have worked with hundreds of people in avoidant dynamics, and I have personally been inside one. And the thing that strikes me every single time is how profoundly misunderstood avoidant people are, even by the people who love them most. Their behavior looks like indifference on the surface. But underneath it is something far more complicated. Here is what today is really about. I am not going to give you a list of hopeful signs and tell you everything is going to be fine. What I am going to do is give you something more valuable than that. I am going to show you how to read an avoidance behavior accurately, so you stop misinterpreting the very moments that matter most. Because there are specific things an avoidant does when they are genuinely, deeply in love, and almost nobody recognizes them for what they are. By the end of this video, you will. The first sign is one that almost everyone experiences but almost nobody interprets correctly. When an avoidant deeply loves you, they start letting you see their contradictions. And what I mean by that is this. They say they need space and then they text you 20 minutes later. They tell you they are not looking for anything serious and then they introduce you to someone who matters to them. They act distant in a group setting and then open up to you completely when you are alone. And from the outside this looks like mixed signals. But what it actually is an internal war playing out in real time. The psychology behind this is rooted in what researchers call the approach avoidance conflict. An avoidant person has two competing drives that are constantly working against each other. The drive to connect, which is a fundamental human need, and the drive to protect, which their nervous system developed as a survival strategy. When they do not have deep feelings for someone, one of those drives easily wins. They simply maintain emotional distance without much internal conflict. But when they genuinely love someone, both drives activate at full intensity at the same time. And that is when the contradictions begin. Think about a specific moment in your relationship. Maybe they said something like, "I just don't do relationships," and then 3 days later asked if you were seeing anyone else. Or they went cold for a week and then showed up with something thoughtful that made you feel completely seen. You probably spent hours trying to understand which version was real. Here is what I want you to understand. Both versions are real. That is exactly the point. The contradiction is not manipulation. It is the sound of someone deeply in love who has not yet figured out how to hold that love without panicking. What this means for you is important. When you see these contradictions, stop trying to pick which signal is the truth and start recognizing that the contradiction itself is the message. An avoidant who does not care does not get pulled back. They simply stay gone. The fact that they keep returning, even after they pull away, tells you something that their words might never directly say. And I need you to stay with me here because this next point changes everything. The second sign is perhaps one of the most telling, and it is this. When an avoidant deeply loves you, they will sit through emotional conversations that they would walk away from with anyone else. Now let me explain why this is such a significant signal. For someone with avoidant attachment, emotional conversations are genuinely physiologically uncomfortable. This is not a personality preference. Research by Dr. James Cohn at the University of Virginia found that avoidantly attached individuals show measurably higher physiological stress responses during relationship conflict and emotional intimacy. Their heart rate increases. Their cortisol spikes. Their brain is literally reading emotional closeness as a threat signal. So when an avoidant stays in a difficult emotional conversation, they are doing something that goes against their nervous system's strongest instinct. Imagine this. You finally tell them how their distance has been making you feel. You have rehearsed this conversation 100 times, and you brace for them to go quiet, to deflect, to change the subject or simply leave. But instead, they stay. They might not say everything perfectly. They might look uncomfortable, maybe even a little guarded. But they do not leave. They hear you out. And at some point in that conversation, something shifts in their eyes. That is not a small thing. For someone with avoidant attachment, staying in that moment is the emotional equivalent of someone with a fear of heights stepping to the edge of a balcony because they know it matters to you. They are overriding a deeply wired response because something about you, specifically you, makes them willing to try. What this means for you is that the quality of an avoidance love is not always visible in what they say. It is visible in what they endure. Pay attention to the moments they stay when every part of their wiring tells them to go. Those moments are love. Now this next one is something most people completely overlook, and it explains so much of the behavior that seems confusing on the surface. This might be the most counterintuitive sign on this entire list, so I want you to really stay with me here. When an avoidant deeply loves you, they are more likely to create problems in the relationship right when things are going well. I know how that sounds, but let me walk you through the psychology because it is genuinely fascinating and it will reframe something that has probably caused you enormous pain. Attachment researchers describe a concept called proximity-triggered anxiety. Here is what it means in simple terms. For someone with anxious attachment, getting close to someone makes them feel safer. The closeness reduces the anxiety. But for someone with avoidant attachment, the opposite happens. The closer they get, the more their nervous system activates. Intimacy does not feel like safety. It feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like danger. So the moment the relationship reaches a new level of depth, Whether that is meeting family, or a beautiful weekend together, or a conversation where they admitted something real, their nervous system fires a warning signal. And their instinct is to create distance to relieve that internal pressure. What this looks like in real life is something you have probably experienced. Things are finally good. You feel closer than ever. And then seemingly out of nowhere they pull back, they start a fight about something minor, or they bring up their doubts about the relationship. And you are left wondering what you did to ruin something that felt so right. You did not ruin it. Their love for you is exactly what triggered the fear. This is what psychologists call the avoidance intimacy ceiling. A point of closeness where their unresolved attachment wounds become more powerful than their desire to stay present with you. The reason this is a sign of love is this. They only hit that ceiling with people who actually matter to them. With someone they are indifferent about, there is no closeness to trigger the fear in the first place. What this means for you is that their sabotage is not about you being too much. It is about them reaching the edge of what they currently know how to handle emotionally. And that edge only exists because you got close enough to find it. Before I continue, I want you to think about your own situation right now. Has there been a moment when things felt genuinely close, genuinely real, and that was exactly when things shifted? Hold that in mind as we move forward. The fourth sign is quieter than the others, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When an avoidant deeply loves you, they remember the small details of your life in a way that quietly surprises you. The reason this matters psychologically is connected to something called selective attunement. An avoidant person maintains emotional distance as a default. They do not generally invest cognitive or emotional energy in tracking the details of other people's inner worlds. It is part of the same defense system that allows them to function without needing deep connection in most of their relationships. But when someone genuinely matters to them, that system partially deactivates. Their attention naturally moves toward that person. Not because they decided to pay more attention, because the emotional pull makes it happen automatically. Here is what this looks like in your life. You mentioned once casually that you had a difficult relationship with your mother growing up. Weeks later, they bring it up in a way that shows they have been thinking about it. Or you said you were nervous about something at work, and they check in about it on the exact day it was happening. Or they remember that you do not like a certain food, or that a particular song matters to you, or that a specific date on the calendar is hard for you. These are not things an avoidant does for everyone. Most people in their lives would say they seem somewhat detached or self-focused. And in many ways, with most people that is accurate. But with someone they love, their attention works differently. The details stick because their emotional system has marked you as significant. What this means for you is this. Watch for the quiet remembering. The moments when they reference something small that shows they have been carrying you in their mind even when they seem distant. That is not coincidence. That is love operating in the only language an avoidant has fully learned. And when you understand this next point, everything starts to make sense in a completely new way. The fifth sign is the one I want to spend the most time on because it is the one that carries the most weight. When an avoidant deeply loves you, they show up in your hardest moments in ways they have never shown up for anyone. Here is the psychology. Avoidant attachment is fundamentally a suppression strategy. The avoidant person learned to minimize emotional needs, both their own and other people's, as a way of maintaining connection without the perceived risk of vulnerability. This means that in most situations, when someone around them is in emotional pain, their natural response is to problem solve, minimize, or quietly withdraw. Not because they do not care, because emotional pain activates their own unresolved wounds and their system's default is to manage that by creating distance from the source. But here is what changes when they genuinely love someone. When you are the one in pain, their attachment to you overrides that suppression reflex. Not always perfectly, not always in the way you might want, but in a way that is unmistakably different from how they respond to everyone else. Think about a time when you were genuinely struggling, when you got news that devastated you, or when something broke down in a way that left you raw and vulnerable. Think about what they did. Maybe they did not say all the right words. Maybe they sat next to you a little awkwardly. But they were there. They did not find a reason to be somewhere else. They did not offer a quick fix and change the subject. They stayed in your pain with you, even though staying in pain is one of the hardest things an avoidant nervous system is asked to do. Dr. Sue Johnson, one of the world's leading experts on adult attachment, describes moments like this as attachment bids. The moments when one partner reaches out from a place of genuine need and the other partner responds, not perfectly, but with presence. For an avoidant, that presence in your most vulnerable moments is one of the clearest expressions of love they know how to give. Because to stay present in someone else's emotional pain, they have to first tolerate their own. And they only do that for someone who has genuinely reached something inside them. What this means for you is perhaps the most important reframe in this entire video. Stop measuring an avoidant's love by how easily they express it in ordinary moments. Start paying attention to who they become in the extraordinary ones. That is where their love reveals itself most honestly. If nothing else from this video, I want you to remember this one thing. An avoidant who does not love you will keep their distance when you are struggling because it protects their comfort. An avoidant who does love you will be uncomfortable and stay anyway. That discomfort they are willing to sit in for you, that is the measure. I want to step away from the psychology for a moment and just talk to you directly. Because I know that understanding the signs is helpful. I know it gives you something to hold on to. But I also know that at the end of the day, what you are really sitting with is not a question about attachment theory. It is a question about whether you are loved. Whether the person you have given so much of yourself to actually sees you. Whether any of this is going to be okay. And I want to acknowledge something that does not get said enough. Loving an avoidant is one of the most emotionally exhausting experiences a person can have. Not because you are weak. Not because you are too sensitive. But because you are putting enormous emotional energy into a dynamic that rarely gives you the clear, consistent reassurance that human beings need to feel secure. You are essentially reading a language that was designed, through years of survival, to be unreadable. And you have been doing that work largely alone. You have probably had moments where you felt genuinely crazy, where you could not tell what was real and what you were projecting, where you wondered if the warmth you felt in those close moments was something you imagined because you wanted it so badly. I need you to hear this clearly. You did not imagine it. The warmth was real. The connection was real. What is also real is that the person you love is carrying wounds that make sustained closeness feel dangerous to them, even when they want it more than anything. That is not your fault. It was never your fault. And here is what I also want you to hold. The fact that you are still here, still trying to understand, still approaching this with empathy instead of bitterness, says something profound about who you are. You could have walked away and decided this person is just broken. You did not. You chose to understand. That kind of love, the kind that keeps trying to see someone clearly even when it is painful, that is rare. Please do not let this experience convince you that your depth is a problem. It is not. It is one of the most extraordinary things about you. Whatever happens with this specific relationship, you deserve someone who meets your love with presence. Who shows up not just in the moments that are easy but in the ones that matter. You deserve consistency. You deserve to feel chosen, not just sometimes, but as a steady, quiet, daily fact of your life. Hold on to that, not as a reason to leave or to stay, but as a reminder of what you are ultimately worth. Now I want to give you 3 things you can actually do with everything you have just learned. Takeaway 1. Stop translating their behavior through your emotional language. If you have anxious attachment, your emotional language is direct. Feeling something and expressing it feel naturally connected. But an avoidance emotional language was built around suppression. So when you experience their distance, your nervous system reads it as rejection because that is what distance would mean coming from you. But in their language, distance is often how they manage an emotion that feels too large. The practical step here is this. When you feel that familiar wave of anxiety about their distance, before you react, ask yourself one question. Is there any evidence from their behavior overall, not just right now, that this person has shown up for me in ways that matter? That question pulls you out of the moment and into the fuller picture. It does not remove the pain, but it stops you from making permanent decisions based on temporary distance. Takeaway 2. Create safety without pressure. One of the most effective things you can do in a relationship with an avoidant is reduce what feels like evaluation to them. Avoidants are exquisitely sensitive to feeling assessed, judged, or tested. When a conversation feels like a test of their emotional adequacy, their system shuts down. The practical shift is to move toward curiosity instead of expectation. Instead of, "Why do you always go quiet when I bring this up?" try, "I noticed you seemed to pull back earlier. I just want you to know there's no pressure here. I'm just curious about you." That is not a manipulation technique. It is a genuine shift in the energy of the interaction. It creates a window instead of a wall. Takeaway 3. Invest in your own secure base. This one is the most important long-term action you can take. An avoidant is more likely to move toward someone who is not entirely dependent on them for emotional regulation. Not because they want someone cold or unfeeling, but because your own security makes intimacy feel less threatening to them. The way you build that security is not by pretending you do not need connection. It is by actively investing in friendships, personal goals, therapy if you have access to it, and the parts of your life that have nothing to do with this relationship. When your happiness does not hinge entirely on their consistency, two things happen. You suffer less in the painful moments, and paradoxically, you become more attractive to the avoidant because you feel safer to get close to. This is a process. It does not happen overnight. But every small step you take toward your own grounded security is a step toward a healthier version of this dynamic. What you have learned today is not something most people ever figure out. Most people look at avoidant behavior and see indifference. You now know how to look deeper. You know that contradictions can be the sound of someone at war with their own love for you. You know that staying in an uncomfortable emotional conversation is one of the most significant things an avoidant can do. You know that sabotage at peak intimacy is not rejection. It is fear of losing something that actually matters. You know that quiet remembering is its own form of devotion. And you know that showing up in your hardest moments, imperfectly but genuinely, is perhaps the clearest declaration an avoidant can make. That is a level of understanding that changes how you see everything in this relationship. Now there is something I have not told you yet, and it is connected directly to everything we covered today. Because knowing these 5 signs is powerful, but there is a specific reason why even avoidants who deeply love someone still cannot fully commit, and it has nothing to do with how much they love you. In the next video, I am going to walk you through exactly what is happening inside an avoidant's mind at the moment they are closest to choosing you, and what makes them pull back even then. If you thought today's video gave you clarity, that one will give you something you have been searching for since this all began. The truth about avoidant love is not simple, but you are now closer to understanding it than most people ever get. And that clarity belongs to you,